Hi, this is Dan Joseph with the China Learning Curve. You may have noticed there's been a lot of bad news coming out of China lately, and as is typical, a lot of dire analyses and grim predictions to go with that news, all of which brings to mind the following critical question. Have you heard the one about the five blind men and the elephant? One feels the tusk and thinks it's a spear. One feels the ear and thinks it's a fan. One feels the side and thinks it's a wall. One feels the tail and thinks it's a rope. And, well, I don't know what the other one feels, but you probably get the point. If something's large and complex and you don't see the big picture, you're going to have a hard time understanding it. Why bring this up now? Well, China is not only huge and complex, it is also highly unique. A communist country, transitioning to free market capitalism, but in a very slow, gradual manner, with some aspects of society changing much faster than others. No one has any experience with such a country because it really hasn't happened before. So it's difficult to figure out China, which is why opinions about China are generally all over the place. China's the best growth story ever told. China's about to collapse. China's a highly competitive free market economy. China's economy is tightly controlled by the Communist Party. There's no shortage of issues that are debated relative to China, and there always seems to be opinion on all sides, pro and con, bull and bear. And usually all sides have a whole bunch of data and facts that they say proves their point, and they're usually right, but that's true of each side. Which is why, to know what's really going on in China, you have to see the big picture. Consider all relevant factors. That's where the elephant and the five blind men come into the picture. If you don't see all the variables, and perhaps most importantly, if you don't understand how China is changing, the direction it is heading, and how it is getting there, you'll have a tough time assessing risk and anticipating what comes next in China. As I alluded to earlier, because there's been a lot of bad news coming out of China, which in turn has led to some dire predictions about China, this is a good time to keep the five blind men and the elephant in mind. Is China's economy going to crash? Is China losing its competitiveness? Is China becoming hostile toward foreign business? Is political risk growing in China? These are the issues that seem to be getting the most attention right now, and for good reason, considering what's been happening in China. We've prepared a series of blogs to try to provide some perspective on each of these questions. The first blog provides some summary thoughts on each issue. We then have individual blog posts for each individual topic, with those posts providing a bit more detail on each issue. Let's start with the economy. Is it going to collapse or perhaps go through a prolonged period of stagnation? We have to begin by admitting that China's economic growth is slowing, no doubt about that. But that's not necessarily a problem. Given the size and maturity of China's economy, it is normal for the economic growth rate to drop below the 8 to 10% average of the last few decades. There will still be plenty of opportunity in China if the growth rate there is between 5 and 7%. More problematic for China is the rapid buildup of debt that has occurred over the last 5 years as China tried to boost growth. At 250%, China's debt to GDP ratio is not at crisis levels yet, but having doubled in the last 5 years, debt levels have definitely been growing at an unsustainable rate. To avert a crisis, China needs to maintain reasonable leverage in the economy and accept a slower growth rate. Also, to maintain growth, China needs to continue to liberalize the economy as it's been doing for the past 30 years. Now, China's leadership has indicated it will do both of the above. Time will tell, but crisis is certainly avoidable. Next, is China losing its competitiveness? With rising wages and appreciating currency and shuttered factories in China, and all the talk of reshoring back to the US, Europe, and other developed markets, it's no wonder some are saying China has lost its competitiveness. But the fact is that trade and manufacturing statistics do not support the notion that Chinese manufacturing is undergoing a precipitous decline. No doubt a transition is underway as China moves from lower cost products like toys and clothes and lighters and toward higher value-added products like appliances and electronics. But all signs are that this transition will be gradual and won't spell the end of manufacturing or competitiveness in China. A number of factors, including lower wages in inland China, productivity gains, moving up the value curve, and a lack of capacity among alternative countries has left Chinese manufacturing more competitive than some think. That doesn't mean some companies won't feel the need to move manufacturing from China. That is happening and will continue to do so. But that won't be the answer for everyone, and while some are leaving China, others are just getting started there. Next is the Chinese government's rough treatment of foreign companies making it too difficult to operate there. Let's start with a few fundamentally important points. First, all emerging markets are challenging due to weakness in the rule of law. China is no exception. Regardless of the legal or governmental issue in China, the general lack of transparency or procedural regularity makes it difficult to be confident in the system. Secondly, for a variety of reasons, including the maturing of the Chinese economy, China is trying to more proactively enforce its own rules. Corruption and antitrust would be examples of this new assertiveness on the part of the Chinese government. The result is increased legal scrutiny in China for all companies. When you have increased scrutiny and a system that isn't transparent, well, that's not a situation that's going to make many people comfortable. But when you look at some of the high-profile cases that have received attention recently, like antitrust in the auto parts field or corruption investigations, in most of the cases, China's actions, though not completely transparent, have not necessarily been out of line with actions other countries have taken and have generally involved legitimate issues. In the case of corruption charges, considering the thousands of Chinese who have been arrested, it is hard to conclude that foreign companies are actually being unfairly targeted in that area. For sure, there are issues that are particularly concerning. Business intelligence and cybersecurity come to mind. Plus, as I said, the lack of transparency and increased scrutiny doesn't make it any easier. But I do think it is a mistake to say that China is out to get foreign companies. The environment has changed a bit. It isn't easy, but I don't think there is reason yet for foreign companies to flee China in fear. Lastly, we have the political situation in China. Freedom of expression and access to the internet have been curtailed in China in recent years, certainly since 2012, although some would say the clampdown started in 2009 or so. While this isn't great news, because China is still at a relatively early stage of development, economic liberalization remains the primary driver of societal improvement, including the development of political rights and freedoms. As long as China continues to offer more freedom and opportunity in the economic realm, political development will follow, as it has in Taiwan, Singapore, and other countries. I would also add that the likelihood of societal instability resulting from opposition to recent restrictions is remote. On the other hand, there is a chance, and this is something worth watching, that China's new internet restrictions will impact non-political areas like business, technology, and science in a way that forces China to reconsider its approach to the internet. In short, it's not all bad news on the political side, although recent developments have not exactly been ideal. That's it for our summary. For more details, please see the individual blog posts related to the economy, China's competitiveness, the legal environment, and the political environment. This is Dan Joseph from the China Learning Curve. Thanks.